Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to Let's Do Lunch. This is our 103rd episode of Let's Do Lunch. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I know there's a lot of crazy things going on in the world, so we try to bring you back to some normalcy here each and every business day with our business show about entertainment, streaming, games, music, and rights tech. Mondays are always about the business of streaming, and we have our wonderful host, Colin Dixon, with us today. Colin, how are you?
I'm doing well, Ned. Good to see you. Yes, we have a fun session today, and we also have a fun session next week. We've got Blake Sabanatelli, I probably murdered his name, from Newsy. So we'll be talking about online news and streaming news next week. And of course, the week after that, we have our final installment of the psychology.
Oh, I was wondering when that was coming up.
That's the final episode, and we'll be summing everything up, looking at churn, figuring out the psychology behind winning people back after they've decided to leave you. So that'll be another fascinating session from Singular and from the psychologists that they bring along. So I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic. And who is on the show today?
So I have asked John Giegengack, who is principal and founder at Hub Research, to join us. John, if you can turn everything back on, welcome back.
Hey guys, how you doing? Good to see you.
Now, our listeners, viewers will probably remember John. John was, I think, my second guest. And I love the Hub Research. If you read my blog, hopefully one or two of you read my blog. You'll have read. I often commentate on Hub Research, and it's fascinating. And John's got some new research on decoding the default, which we're going to get to in just a second. And I just want to remind everybody: if you have a question, please enter it in the Q&A window. Don't enter it in the chat window. I'm not monitoring the chat window. I'm monitoring the Q&A window. So with that, let's get the conversation going, John. First of all, tell us about the survey. Who did you talk to?
Sure. So this is a survey that we've done every year since 2013. The name of the project is called Decoding the Default. But it's one of 6 studies that we do each year. And the reason for this one is that as the tendency of TV consumers to use multiple TV providers grows, and the number of providers that any one person is using grows, we thought that there might be a lot of value in looking at not just how many subscribers or users does each platform have, but which ones are emerging as kind of the home base for TV. So the ones that people are most likely to say, that is the first thing that I turn on when I want to watch TV, and everything else is kind of supporting that provider. So it's an online survey. We talked to TV consumers in the U.S. between the ages of 16 and 74, and they have to have some form of broadband access at home.
So I suppose one of the most crucial questions is, when did they answer the survey? Because, with these extraordinary times that we're living in, I guess I'm wondering if they were all in lockdown at the time when they answered the survey. So when did you administer the survey?
So we do it every August. So this one was, I think, on the 3rd week of August this year. And definitely you can see some differences. There's some questions that we ask that are the same across all the surveys. So we could definitely see some things that were different in August from what they were in June or April. As some of the harshest, at least some areas of the company have started to open up more. But this one was fielded right, about 3 weeks ago, a month ago.
Very good. So at that time, some places I think were still in lockdown, but I think a lot of places were actually beginning to come out of lockdown and things are opening up in various places in the country. So it won't be totally lockdown impacted. So, okay, great. So why don't I'm going to share some of the data that we can chat about. And I think this is probably a real good place to start. So talk us through what's going on here. What types of TV service do you have? What did you ask? And boy, it looks like a pretty clear trend going on there, John, doesn't it?
Yeah, so this is a question. This actually isn't a question. This is just some analysis of the data. But in every study that we do, we ask people a series of questions to enumerate all the different TV providers that they use. So, do they have a pay TV subscription, cable, satellite, or telco? Do they have any SVODs? Which one? Do they use any free ad-supported platforms? Pretty much a pretty exhaustive list. And then on the back end, we just split the sample into these three groups. So people who use only traditional forms of video, which if you look at the footnote, you can see just for purposes of this, we define that as either pay TV or an over-the-air antenna. And then people who are streaming only, who are basically cord cutters or cord nevers, and they only use online sources of content. And then the green bar are people that use both of those at the same time. So the really interesting thing here is that at least in a lot of the media that you read is sort of focused on the increase in cord cutting, and to be sure, that is getting bigger. You can see in our own data between 2014 and 2020, the number of people who say they only use streaming sources of TV has doubled, but it loses sight of the fact that the lion's share, this year about 2/3 of people are using some combination of pay TV and online together. And, we think that's really important because it means that the majority of consumers are still using pay TV. They haven't deserted it completely as the gloom and doom media we read sometimes would lead us to think that they have. But critically, they are using lots of streaming sources, usually about 3 to 4 other streaming sources in addition to their pay TV. And that means that for any companies who want to attract an audience or who want to get the maximum attention from these people, that ecosystem where they're using lots of different TV sources at once, you have to approach that a lot differently. And there's a lot of differences in how people discover content, how they decide what they're going to watch, and also just how much competition there is for their disposable time. So it's a really different picture from 6 years ago, but pay TV, traditional pay TV, is still a really important part of it.
I guess the thing that really caught my eye in this chart, John, was the 18%. That's a big increase in the number of people that are relying specifically on streaming for their entertainment, right?
Yeah, it's a pretty big number. There are some, we've got all the virtual MVPDs available now that have been gaining some users, but there's also just been a massive number of streaming platforms that have launched, and a lot of those streaming platforms most people, about 30% of people said that, I think we fielded this one in June, that they had added at least one new TV provider while they were on lockdown. So there's more than enough content available now just from streaming sources to fill disposable time. One of the things that seems to be holding people still to traditional pay TV is ease of getting live content, and especially ease of getting local programming. So that's one of the things that kind of keeps that really relevant to people. But there are a lot of people, 20%, I agree, it is a pretty high number of people just to get all their content from streaming sources.
Right. But we shouldn't be fooled about, I guess we'll get to this data in just a minute. We shouldn't be fooled into thinking that just because they have live TV, they're using it as much as they used to, right? But as I say, we'll get to that in just a second. And I thought the next really interesting factoid was how many people are actually using one of the big four. So let's talk us through this data here, John.
Yeah, this one's really, really important, and we've been following it for a couple of years. so everybody, you know, Netflix was kind of the bellwether, the pioneer of streaming for consumers, and the ones that people adopted first. But really, Netflix kind of socialized people to this idea that you could subscribe to a streaming platform that has almost a bottomless catalog of content available on demand, and that the algorithms or the interface would sort of steer you through that until you found something that you liked. And people then subsequently began adding one or more other streaming platforms to the first one that they used. This is now, this sort of SVOD stacking has progressed to the point where in 2020, in this latest survey, 50% of everybody, not just 50% of streaming users, but 50% of all the TV consumers that we surveyed use at least two of the four biggest streaming platforms. 18% of people said they use three of those four. 10% of people say they watch content from all of those four. And the impact of that is huge because all of those platforms have hundreds, if not more likely, thousands of titles to choose from. The amount of disposable time that the average person has to watch TV, you know, pandemics aside, tends to remain pretty consistent. And any one of these platforms has enough content to fill all of that disposable time if it was the only option available. But now people are using two or three or four of these, and it means that there is an absolutely massive amount of content, you know, on top of everything they might be getting from pay TV, that's competing for that same pie of disposable time. And that means that the competition for any show, even if it's a really high profile show or a really expensive original show, just has to compete that much harder to win over a share of that time.
Right. The interesting thing here is that the data here is that suggesting right there that 73% have at least one.
Correct.
But likewise, I'm pretty surprised that 50% now say that they have at least two. Was the most popular grouping Netflix and Amazon, or Netflix and Hulu? Was there a most popular twofer?
Netflix is a part of almost every. There's very few people that have one of those other ones. There's very few people that have more than one, where Netflix isn't one of them. Yep. And we also asked people how long they've had each one. And in almost all cases, Netflix is the first streaming provider that people, it was kind of the gateway drug to streaming for most people. They got that first, and then that got them excited about using other streaming platforms. So it's usually Netflix plus something else. I can't remember what was the next most popular combination. Amazon had the next highest number of users this year after Netflix did, so it was probably Netflix and Amazon. And Disney actually, I think in this study, was already up to about 25% of users, even though it's only been out for a relatively short amount of time. So that one's actually gained some, made a lot of progress in a short period of time. We actually only looked at the big three up until this year, and then Disney Plus had enough users that we added that on.
And were there any other demographic trends? I mean, were younger people subscribed to more services in general? Is that something that you found?
They do, but older people still subscribe to more than one. So it's not, younger people are more likely to use streaming platforms. They're more likely to use more platforms. But everybody else is highly likely to do that as well too. So it's no longer something that's just being driven by young people or being driven by people that are technologically savvy.
Yeah. I think that's something I'm seeing also in the data. That's the thing that's come across. I've been looking at the Nielsen data that's been coming out recently, and the thing that it really reinforced with me, John, was that this is no longer something that's confined to one particular group, is it? It's a really broad-based shift to streaming.
Yeah, I mean, the center of gravity of TV viewing has, pay TV for sure is not gone, but it's not the sun at the center of the solar system of viewing platforms the way it used to be. It's now one of several planets in orbit. and people are distributing their time accordingly across lots of different platforms. And so that, no longer being that first remote that gets picked up, the first source that gets switched on when someone wants to watch, is not an insignificant change at all.
Sure.
We think, especially as the number of platforms that people have continue to rise, and if the economy takes a hit and they want to cut back on some of the ones that are paid for, there's going to be a big difference in the prognosis for platforms that are sort of that home base, that thing that people turn on first when they want to watch it, versus the thing that's sort of on the outskirts and they only watch it occasionally. Those are more likely to be the first thing to go when they either have to or want to cut back.
Now, you mentioned that you did ask about AVOD. How is it faring in usage? I noticed that Comcast claimed this morning that Zumo had 24 million monthly active users. And of course, Pluto, I think, is up over 30 now. Tubi's claiming something very similar. So these are very big numbers. Are you seeing those numbers in your surveys?
Yeah, in our most recent survey, I think 36% of people said that they use at least one AVOD platform. So Pluto TV, Tubi, Crackle, et cetera. We track all of them, all the biggest ones at least. But that's the highest it's ever been. And again, I think part of that is being driven by the fact that the average person now uses 4.8 different TV sources. And for 69% or whatever that last slide said, one of those sources is pay TV. But even so, that means they're using about 4 other sources in addition to that. And we think that people are starting to bump up against the ceiling of how many different providers they can use, and definitely how many different providers they want to pay for.
Mm-hmm.
And AVOD platforms offer a kind of totally different experience. They offer, for one thing, they're free. Some of them you don't even have to create an account, so it's completely frictionless to get in and give it a try. And they also, many of them offer kind of a laid-back experience. So one of the things that we hear from streaming users in general, and actually Netflix users in particular, is that the task of figuring out what you're going to watch next is hard, or at least seems a kind of a first world problem to me. But it sometimes it requires more work than some people want to do. And AVOD platforms give you that sort of live TV-like experience with the grid, where you can kind of sit back and have something delivered to you. And I think that there's times and places where that's exactly the kind of experience that people want.
Yeah.
And you can actually see that mirrored in things like in streaming music, where Spotify, for example, has offered channels. They used to just go in and kind of seek out songs or artists you want to hear, and now you can choose Chris Stapleton radio or Red Dirt country, and it will decide for you what you're going to hear. It'll be within a pretty specific genre that you've identified, more specific than just R&B or pop or country. But still, you're not doing the heavy lifting of figuring out what the next song is going to be. And I think that AVODs are sort of filling a similar role when it comes to video content.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right. As a long-time Pandora user, so that's how I use Pandora. It's definitely the way. Yeah, I noticed Chris the Beauvoir of Viacom CBS. He said something really interesting. He said, actually, I think it's Robert de Beauvoir. He said that he views the two services, SVOD and AVOD, as a continuity. So they're not really in competition. They're really servicing two different functions, and I think I really agree with that. I think obviously they've got CBS All Access and Showtime on the pay side, and they have Pluto TV on the free side. And so I guess what they're looking at is they're looking at the usage amongst those two, and they're seeing people moving freely between the two experiences. So that seems to support exactly what you're saying from the data.
Yeah, and I think giving people a choice too of content that they can watch without ads, and then other times where they can watch for free and agree to see some ads in exchange for that, is a really good fit. We find that most people are not against all advertising. they are against sort of the traditional linear TV ad experience where there's what many people feel is a very high number of ads, and they're usually not targeted to your interests or topics you care about in any particular way. And especially if TV is being delivered online, all of the ads that you see other places online are either, the ad loads are lower, the ads are shorter, they're served up to you in particular in some way. If you're watching an ad on YouTube, there's a countdown clock that tells you when the ads are going to be over. On some of the online platforms, if you watch ads, you have the option to choose sort of what category you see. So we find that all of those things make the prospect of having ads integrated into video content much more palatable. And in fact, if you tell people to assume all the content is going to be the same, would you rather watch for free and see some ads, or would you rather pay a subscription, or would you rather pay transactionally, where you transact and buy episodes, for example, on their own? Free with ads and subscription are almost tied among the respondents in general. They're each at about 45% of people who say they prefer that way, and then there's 10% who say they prefer transactional. If you talk to younger consumers, they're more likely to say they prefer subscriptions. But in general, there's a lot of people still who are willing to tolerate advertising or even welcome advertising if it's delivered to them in a tolerable way.
Very good. I just saw a couple of comments pop up, John. There's some fans of your research out there, so they're really lapping this up, and we got some good questions coming in. Let's take another look at. I mentioned earlier that just because people have paid television, still many people still have paid television, doesn't mean that they're using it as much. And I think here's the proof right here, John. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so this is a question where we showed people a list of all the different TV sources that they say that they use, and so those were individual ones down to the brand. And then we said, here's 100 points. Allocate, if 100 equals all of your TV viewing time, allocate those points to tell us how your viewing time is distributed across all of these platforms that you have. And then on this chart, we just boiled that up to make an aggregate total of the percent of time among everybody that went to something that comes through your set-top box. So live plus DVR plus pay TV, VOD. And then the other part being how much time goes to any online source. So that would be any streaming platform, any AVOD platform. It would also be actually authenticated TV everywhere, although that's a pretty small part of it. But basically the idea was to look at where are people spending more time and how much of their TV time is going to that box that sits on top of your shelf with your DVR and your VOD inside of it. And again, this I just showed 2019 and 2020 here. But this is a trend we've seen going on for some time, where the share of time is shifting more and more online than through the pay TV box. Part of that's because there are way more streaming and online providers now than there were just a few years ago. And another reason for that is that now a growing number of people have smart TV sets that make it really easy for people who aren't technological wizards to access those streaming platforms from the chair they're used to, on the screen they're used to, from the remote control they're used to. So there are some outside factors that are making that online share get bigger, but still, it's another piece of evidence that sort of the home base for TV viewing is shifting away from these traditional methods and shifting to online.
Yeah, so I guess this is really pretty bad news for traditional pay TV, right? Because what this is saying is that people are just spending a lot less time over 2019 and years before than they were, and they're spending a lot more time with the services that they're engaging with online, and many of those services cost significantly less, don't they?
And I think if the pay TV companies were to not evolve their product at all, it would definitely be very bad news. That they're not doing that. We see Comcast, for example, is having some pretty big success with its Xfinity with the Flex box. to kind of give people who don't watch a lot of cable TV still a reason to have a relationship with Comcast. One of the really big things, one of the big advantages that pay TV providers have is that they actually have the ability to aggregate content. So as people use more and more sources, one of the frustrations that we hear the most is that it's hard to manage and navigate all of those providers in an easy way. And if you're Netflix, there's not a whole lot you can do about that. Netflix can't aggregate content from cable and from Hulu and from everywhere else. But if you're a cable company, you can incorporate any of the streaming platforms or incorporate YouTube with all of the live TV, with the other video on demand that you have, and give consumers a really, a one-stop shop, a really tight, streamlined experience from which they can manage all of those different providers and navigate all that content. And we found that that's a hugely valuable thing for consumers. People that have integrated, for example, Netflix with their cable account so that they can see all the Netflix results in their on-demand. People who access Netflix that way, most of them proceed to access it that way from then on. So it breaks the habit of however they were using Netflix prior to that, and it keeps the pay TV providers part of the equation. They're not getting they're not conducting business while people are watching Netflix, but people are also not switching their input and escaping over to Netflix and sort of remaining inside Netflix indefinitely after that. The pay TV people are keeping an oar in the water, and they're providing a really valuable service, which is taking this complicated TV ecosystem and making it simpler for people to use.
And it's, one of the remarkable things I've noticed about pay television is that their attitude has shifted so dramatically over the last year. I get the strong impression from folks like AT&T, well, definitely from AT&T, but also from Comcast now, that they're actually very indifferent to consumers, whether they keep traditional pay TV or not. And if you look at strategically what Comcast is doing, they recognize video is important as an anchor to their bundle, but they're beginning to understand that they don't need to have a traditional pay TV service to do that. So they've released the Flex Box, which they're giving away free to broadband. And if to broadband users, and if they can get people on that and using that can also help as that anchor. So it's really a fascinating evolution. We're kind of running out of time here, so I want to kind of push us through. There's another slide that I wanted to take a look here as well, and that's this one that shows how important Netflix has become to people's viewing. Talk us through what's going on with this slide.
Yes, so this is that default question that we ask. Yeah. So for every respondent, we show them the list of all the different providers they say that they use at all. And then we say, which one of these is your default source? By default source, we mean the first thing you turn on when you want to watch TV. And then they can pick one, but only one of those providers. And so what we're highlighting here is just a couple of them. This is the percent of people each year who said that live TV was their default source, and the percent of people who said that Netflix was their default source. And so you can see that live TV continues to fall as people's default. It's actually still the single most common default out of all of them. But you can see that Netflix has closed a ton of ground. And in fact, if we add up all of the online providers together, they total more than live TV, and they total more than MVPD set-top boxes. And again, that's partly driven by the fact that there's so many of them, so there's more of them to add together now. But live TV for sure, it wasn't that long ago when live TV was almost the only way that you could watch. And now it's what people use for really specific things that there's a need to watch live. Like news or sports or local programming. And it makes sense too, because you can see there are some shows that have really kind of capitalized on the things that are cool about live TV. Like for example, Live PD, which was sadly just canceled a little while ago, or the live Broadway productions that were on Fox or NBC. The takeaway for me is that live TV, there has to be, the content on there has to be something that there's a reason to watch it live, some reason to see it at the same time as everyone else. And just putting content that someone could find on Netflix, but making them watch it at a particular time on live TV with ads in it is not such a great value proposition for viewers anymore.
Yeah. Now, the remarkable thing to me is that, I mean, if you think about live TV, it has all the great brands that we know and at least previously loved. And yet one service, one online service is almost as important as a default source as all of the television channels that you get with the pay TV subscription. It really seems to me, it really speaks to me about how dramatically the way we want to watch has shifted, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think it's the way that you want to watch, and I think it's, again, if we look back to the music industry, which was kind of the first type of entertainment to get revolutionized by this, one of the things that made Apple the company it is today was among other things was iTunes, but getting all of the music labels to agree so they could split apart a 16 track album and let people buy one track at a time, which everybody knew that mostly people only wanted one or two tracks, but they put all those other ones in there so they could sell it for $17. Young people today, looking at a bundle of 300 channels and knowing that they're going to watch maybe 15 of them, which is about the typical distribution according to Nielsen, that's as anathema to them as it would be to buy a 16-song album just to hear the one song that you want. So I think a lot of, one of the reasons that Netflix is really popular for sure is the original shows, but they, when Netflix started, they didn't have any original shows. And in fact, the only shows that they had were the ones that the TV network sold them because they thought no one was ever going to watch them again. So Netflix was the online equivalent of the blue bucket at Walmart with all the $5.99 DVDs in it. But the way that they made that successful was they made the process of searching through all of that fun, and they made it easy for people to find exactly what they would be interested in and ignore all of the stuff that they didn't care about. And that's one thing that a pay TV bundle does not do very well, which is make you, not only make you pay for stuff you're not going to watch, but make you sift through all of that stuff until you find the things you're really interested in, as opposed to just servicing that, or better yet, even just letting you pay for what you would like to have.
Yeah. And one of the things I've noted with Netflix, particularly over the last few months, as live TV has sort of run into this huge dry spell because of the production shutdown, Netflix has continued to drop new shows into the service on pretty much the same pace that it's had before. I have a feeling that that's one of the reasons that they're a big beneficiary this year. But I got to say, even looking at the trends, it's very clear that was the trend anyway, and that maybe this has just advanced it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, Netflix, just produces at such a higher level than everyone else. They had a lot more kind of in the can to tide them over. But for sure, if you talk to consumers, they will tell you, or you can derive that as new content starts to dry up, or at least content that's new to them, whether it's a brand new show or not, that will make any given platform of less interest. And it's kind of interesting because the brand new content is valuable to people if they want to watch it. But even if it's not something they're interested in, the fact that there's always new content showing up sort of adds to this perception that people have that a given platform is sort of bottomless, that there will always be new things, there'll always be interesting things to watch. And just that sort of perception, whether or not there is more new stuff or not, has a big impact on which brands people feel are more valuable versus others. There's a lot of perception that people have and use to make decisions that might or might not match reality. They don't actually test it. They just get that idea and act on it. Yeah.
Nick Blake was just amplifying your brand statement in the chat. He says brand, and I think I agree with him. We're going to take a look at a couple more slides here before we go to the Q&A. There are some questions that I definitely want to get to in the Q&A. So I'm going to sort of glance over a couple here. Now this is just tell us what's going on here, John, but I really want to get to the previous slide to this. So
yep.
So tell us what's going on.
So this is actually this is actually just what I said a minute ago. This looks at what's your default source for TV viewing, and then adds up aggregates all the online sources as a default into one, and aggregates all of the set-top box into one. And as you can see in 2019, that the total for online sources was tied with the total for people who defaulted to any pay TV source. And in 2020, online started to pull away.
And this is where the detail is really shown, I think, is in the age grouping of this. So, I mean, this to me is pretty remarkable, particularly the older generation. So talk us through this.
Yeah, so this shows the percent who default to live TV by age group, and then the light blue bar is last year, and the dark blue bar is this year. So, you know, as you were alluding to, there a couple of big takeaways from this is that very few young people say that live TV is the default way that they watch TV. And in fact, it even dropped from 21% in 2019 to only 14% this year. So young people in general are really turning to their online sources are much more likely to be the thing they turn on first when they want to watch. But as you and I were talking about earlier, defaulting to live TV is much higher among those 55 or over. But even there, about half of people say that their default source is something other than live TV. Now, a lot of these people are probably saying DVR is almost certainly the number two. In fact, I'm sure DVR is the number two most common default source among these people. But after that, it's Netflix or some other online platform. So even older folks are making online or streaming kind of a common part of their video diet. It's not limited to any demographic group anymore. It's really something ubiquitous that's happening just to people that watch TV.
Right. And I guess pretty unsurprising is, well, let me clear the annotation there, is which service people really want to hang on to, right?
Yeah, so this is we asked two questions. There are actually a couple of my favorite ones that we ask. One of them, we say, we show them a list of all the different providers they say that they use, and we say, if you had to get rid of one of these, which one would you get rid of? And then we ask it the other way. We say, if you had to get rid of all of these providers and you could only keep one, which one would you keep? And so that's what we're looking at here. And the two columns are, the one on the left is just everybody that uses each of those platforms. And then the blue column are people who use that platform and they say it's their default source. So the takeaway here is that having a user and having someone who says, a user that says their default source is a huge difference. So you can see that on all of these, the number of people who say that it would be the only provider that they would keep is anywhere from twice as high to 4 times as high, depending on which one of these providers that you look at. But it just shows that the importance, especially as people are using more and more of these providers, the importance of delivering either content or some kind of experience, something that's going to make you be the default source, the most important provider that they have. If you're just relying on number of users, it can give a pretty skewed idea of how much of a connection each one of those users has with a platform. All users are clearly not created differently, and the people who say that a platform is their default source for watching TV, they have a much stronger relationship with that brand than if it's not their default.
Very good. So, okay, so let's take a look at the user questions. And Laura, if you can put the poll up, people can be answering the poll questions while we chat about some of these questions, John, and there's some pretty interesting ones. Steve LeBlanc, he says, is your research projecting a significant short-term decline and long-term demand for linear networks in general? Let's talk about that question first.
I think there might be, for linear networks, I think possibly yes, because people are still watching a lot of live TV. but just whether it's on demand or DVR or live, people only use a very small proportion, you know, something like, I think about less than 20% of all the networks that they have in their bundle. And as the streaming options continue to grow, there isn't enough time, I think, to sustain a lot of the smaller networks, especially the ones who can't afford to produce or buy really sort of top end content that's going to attract people to watch them. So I think that the amount of linear viewing, you know, we know from Nielsen that continues to fall. There's still lots of it, but I think that the number of networks that linear viewing is distributed across may prove to be unsustainable.
Right. Actually, this Steve goes on and he wonders if the corporate shift, like Disney, is now pretty much 100% focused on building their online business. He wonders if that's having a knock-on effect inside of live TV, purely and simply because, you know, maybe it's a better environment to be watching inside Disney Plus. And I got a feeling he's probably right in the short term that is impacting viewership on their primary channels. But, you know, I suspect we'd have to dig into Nielsen data to really find the answer to that question.
I would think it definitely is. I mean, for me, I think about the future of live TV, and I think, you know, what needs to happen, and we've seen this happening to some extent, but there's been lots and lots of innovation in terms of the online experience for watching video, and there's been far less innovation in the live TV viewing experience. And in some cases where people have tried to innovate with live TV, it's been really successful. So, you know, so live TV was a show that was created so that there was a reason to watch it as it happened. There were things and experience you wouldn't get from streaming something on Netflix that you would get from that show. And it was one of the most, I think it was the most successful show on A&E and one of the most successful shows on cable. Similarly with things like, you know, some of the most successful shows on live TV are the award shows or the performance shows where there's a reason to see it when everybody else sees it.
Yeah.
And there's some currency in that. And I think what doesn't fly on live TV anymore is where you are asking people to watch on your schedule with ads included something that they could probably find either that content or something just like it on Netflix anyway. So I think back when I was a kid, it seemed like either Trading Places or Commando was on live TV every Saturday at 2 p.m. And that was fine for me because I would be able to watch some of that, but not there wasn't anywhere else to look at it. And today, if you're in the mood for, you know, a movie from 8 years ago, maybe you want to watch the one that's on live TV, but there's probably 1,000 other movies just like that you could go and find at the drop of a hat on Netflix. And there's no real reason to be watching that live. So people, I guess the bottom line is that people don't have to compromise anymore. They have enough. Right. They have enough choices now that there has to be a really compelling reason for them to watch that piece of content on that platform, or they can just go find something else.
Yeah, I noticed that NBCU, in a report that they just recently put out, said that 73% of entertainment type shows are now watched on demand. So there is really little compulsion among viewers to watch those shows live anymore. They're very comfortable watching those things on demand.
I mean, there's some exceptions to that too. Like if you get people really interested in a show and then they want to watch it every week when it comes out. TNT did this really, really cool experiment a few years ago. I think it was on The Last Ship, where they in some markets, they put all of the back episode stacks for the whole entire series for the past 2 seasons, I think it was, available on demand. And then in other markets, they only had the rolling 3 or rolling 5 or whatever it was available. And in the markets where all of the previous episodes were available, the linear ratings for new episodes were much, much higher than in the markets where they only had a few episodes available. And to me, that's, you know, we've seen that in lots of our research too. But if you get people really hooked on a show and really excited about what's coming next, the reason to watch live is because that's the first place you can see it, and they don't want to wait. So that's another way that live TV can be made relevant, besides sort of innovating with the content itself.
Yeah, in that NBCU data was pretty interesting. I looked at Saturday Night Live, and I suspect that a lot of people do watch that live, but the biggest viewing day for Saturday Night Live on demand is Monday. It's huge. When we get into work, or when we reconnect with work colleagues, that's, I think, when people really, that kicks into gear. And by the way, it kind of vanishes from on-demand viewing. By the end of the week, it's completely gone. So, well, we're just about out of time, I'm afraid, John. There are more questions which we didn't get to. Fascinating discussion, as always. Let's take a quick look at the survey results, please, Laura. So I asked, what is your default source for viewing TV? And 60% said online streaming, 33% pay TV. And my goodness, there's a couple of people out there who are still watching antenna. I have an antenna as well, but I wouldn't call it
a lot of people do.
I wouldn't call it my default source, but I suppose we would expect a very high percentage of folks in this group to say that online was their preferred default. If you had to drop all your TV providers except one, which one would you keep? And this I find kind of surprising. 40% said that they would keep live TV from an MVPD. That seems like a pretty high number. I'm actually quite surprised about that.
Yep. And of course, it doesn't seem crazy to me.
No. And second place is Netflix, with Hulu coming in third, and HBO. Wow, there's a lot of HBO Max users out there as well. That's pretty interesting. And the final question: where did you discover your latest new show? And wow, there it is. Netflix wins hands down. So definitely that flow of new shows into Netflix is really paying benefits, and it also looks like it's helping out HBO Max too. So, John, this has been a fascinating conversation as always. Thank you so much for sharing this great data. And people should check out that report from Hub Research if they haven't already.
Yep, you can download an excerpt of that from our website for free. Very
good. Thank you, John. Ned, back to you.
All right, John and Colin, appreciate it. Great show today. Yeah, those were interesting results on the survey, particularly the second question. So folks, tomorrow, same time, same place, noon Pacific, we have David Bloom from Forbes as our moderator, and we have two executives from nCompass who will be talking about the broad topic of the future of entertainment. So we'll see you then. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.